In Austin, Texas, a simple Thanksgiving wish revealed secrets that should have stayed buried. I am the Nightmare Maestro, and tonight's tale explores the terrifying truth that sometimes getting exactly what you wish for is the worst curse of all. Maya Anders had always loved the familiar chaos of her family's Thanksgiving gatherings in their sprawling Austin ranch house. The November air carried the mingled aromas of sage, butter, and decades of tradition as 38 relatives crowded around 3 joined tables. At 32, she still sat at what was jokingly called the cousin's corner, with Rachel, her favorite cousin since childhood. They shared knowing glances as Uncle Gerald launched into his annual retelling of how he'd almost gone pro in football, while Aunt Patricia passive-aggressively critiqued everyone's dish contributions. The carved turkey sat demolished, surrounded by the battlefield of empty serving plates and half-drunk wine glasses that caught the warm light from the antique chandelier overhead. Maya studied the familiar faces around her, wondering how many more Thanksgivings they'd all have together like this. Her grandmother, Margaret, now 83, moved slower each year but insisted on hosting in the house she'd lived in since 1965. Every corner held memories, some sweet, some bitter, all part of their shared history. Maya reached for the wishbone that her grandmother had carefully dried for 2 weeks, holding it out to Rachel with their old childhood ritual. Winner gets the universe. The tradition dated back to when they were both 7, hiding under the dining room table and making increasingly outlandish wishes. They linked pinkies first, then gripped the brittle bone. The snap echoed with unusual clarity in the busy room, cutting through conversation like a knife. Maya held the longer piece and, without thinking, blurted out with a laugh, "I wish I knew what everyone was really thinking." Rachel's face flickered with something. Concern? Fear? Before she forced a smile. "Careful what you wish for, 'cause..." The words came out strangely hollow, almost prophetic. Maya noticed how Rachel's hands trembled slightly as she gathered the broken pieces of bone, depositing them into her napkin with unusual care. Around them, the festivities continued unchanged, but something in the air had shifted, like the subtle pressure drop before a storm. The ceiling fans spun lazily overhead, creating moving shadows that seemed to dance across the faces of her family members. Maya would later remember this moment with painful clarity, the last instant before everything she thought she knew about her family began to unravel. The last moment before the truth began to seep in like poison through the cracks of their carefully maintained facade. The first thought hit Maya like an ice pick to the temple, just as she was reaching for her glass of Cabernet. If they knew about the money I've been stealing from Mom's account? It was her brother Kevin's voice, but his lips weren't moving as he helped clear the dishes. Maya's wine glass froze halfway to her mouth, her hand trembling so badly that dark red droplets splashed onto the cream tablecloth. The stains spread like tiny blooms of blood as Kevin's unspoken words continued to pierce her consciousness. "Just 2 more transfers and I can pay off Marcus. They'll never notice if I..." The voices multiplied like echoes in a canyon, and Patricia's surgical critique of the turkey wasn't just about the cooking. "Probably serving us hormone-injected meat. That's why Susan's kids are so huge. Bet she shops at those discount stores." Maya's head swiveled toward her aunt, but Patricia's mouth was closed as she daintily dabbed her lips with a napkin. The perfectly applied coral lipstick left symmetrical stains on the white fabric, like twin wounds. The cacophony grew until it felt like standing in the center of a twisted choir. Every casual smile, every polite nod now carried a dark undertow of unspoken commentary. Her cousin Michael's cheerful discussion of his new job masked thoughts of the affair he was having with his boss's wife. Detailed images of hotel rooms and deleted text messages that made Maya's stomach turn. Sweet elderly Aunt Rose's compliments about the decorations concealed bitter resentment about her daughter's choice of spouse, complete with vivid fantasies of their marriage failing. Maya pressed her fingertips against her temples, trying to create pressure points to counteract the building migraine. The chandelier light that had seemed so warm minutes ago now felt harsh and interrogating, highlighting every forced smile and avoided glance around the table. She watched her relatives' mouths move in innocent conversation, while their minds spewed darkness, gambling debts, hidden addictions, extramarital affairs, and buried hatreds that had festered for generations. The disconnect between spoken words and inner thoughts made reality feel unstable, like trying to walk on two floors moving in opposite directions. Maya caught her reflection in a decorative mirror across the room. She looked pale, almost ghostly, as if the weight of these secrets was already beginning to drain her. Around her, the Thanksgiving gathering continued its normal rhythm. But now she could hear the discordant symphony playing beneath the surface, a cacophony of lies and hidden truths that threatened to drown out everything else. Maya retreated to the kitchen, hoping distance would dampen the assault of thoughts. Instead, the enclosed space seemed to amplify them, bouncing off the subway tiles like radio signals caught in an echo chamber. The thoughts came faster now, more intense. Her uncle's gambling debts that threatened to bankrupt his children's college funds. Her sister-in-law's secret prescription drug addiction. The affair her father had nearly started with his young secretary last spring. Each revelation felt like another shard of glass embedding itself in her psyche. The kitchen's familiar comfort had transformed into a confessional booth, where she was an unwilling priest, forced to hear the sins of everyone around her. The gleaming granite countertops reflected distorted versions of her family members as they moved in and out, dropping off dishes and storing leftovers. Every casual brush of contact brought new horrors flooding into her mind. But it was Rachel's thoughts that stopped Maya's breath in her throat. As her cousin loaded the dishwasher, her mind churned with guilt about something that happened 23 years ago. Images flashed through Maya's head with brutal clarity. A deserted construction site bathed in security lights. A man's face twisted in terror. A rusty pipe that caught the moonlight before it swung down. The details burned themselves into Maya's consciousness. July 15th, 2001. 11:47 p.m. The victim's Timex had stopped at the moment of impact, its face cracked, but forever marking the exact instant of death. Maya gripped the counter, her knuckles white against the dark stone. She knew that case. Everyone in Austin knew about the unsolved murder of Peter Reeves, the construction foreman found beaten to death at his work site. The case had gone cold decades ago, but Rachel's thoughts painted a vivid picture of exactly how his skull had caved in. Maya could feel the weight of the pipe in her own hands, could hear the wet sound of impact, could smell the metallic tang of blood mixing with summer dust. The worst part wasn't just knowing, it was understanding why. Through Rachel's memories, Maya saw the string of events that led to that night. The harassment, the threats, the certainty that no one would believe a 19-year-old girl over a respected foreman. The fear that had turned to rage, the rage that had turned to violence, and the cold calculation that followed as Rachel cleaned the scene, erased evidence, created alibis. The relief when the case went cold. Mixed with the guilt that never quite faded, Maya could no longer look her cousin in the eye, but everywhere else she turned revealed new horrors. Each family member's thoughts now seemed to carry the weight of dark secrets, their mundane conversations masking sinister undertones. Her uncle's football stories masked memories of point-shaving schemes that had ruined lives. Her grandmother's gentle humming concealed thoughts about a decades-old betrayal that had led to someone's suicide, a secret she'd carried for 50 years. The thoughts began to overlap, creating a suffocating tapestry of horror. Maya tried to focus on the physical world, the clink of dishes, the scrape of leftovers being packed away, the distant sound of cars leaving the driveway, but the thoughts kept coming, stronger now, more insistent. They carried not just words, but sensations. The sticky warmth of blood on hands that had long since been washed clean, the weight of guilt that never lessened, the sharp edge of memories that couldn't be dulled by time. The kitchen's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry insects, casting harsh shadows that seemed to twist and writhe. Maya watched her family members move through these shadows, their faces alternating between light and darkness with each passing moment. Their thoughts had become a symphony of horror. Every casual touch, every glance, every moment of silence carried new revelations that threatened to shatter her sanity. Her mother's concern about Maya's obvious distress carried undertones of darker worries. Fears about hereditary mental illness carefully hidden from the family, memories of an aunt who'd had similar episodes before being quietly institutionalized. Even her father's reassuring pat on her shoulder brought images of business deals gone wrong, of competitors who'd mysteriously disappeared, of offshore accounts filled with blood money. Time seemed to lose meaning as Maya stood in the kitchen, watching her family's carefully constructed facades crumble in her mind while remaining perfectly intact in reality. The duality was maddening, seeing them act out their normal roles while knowing the darkness that lurked beneath every smile, every hug, every casual conversation. By sunset, Maya's head felt like it would explode. The relatives had begun to leave, each goodbye tainted by the knowledge of their hidden sins. The fading light through the kitchen windows cast long shadows that seemed to reach for her with accusing fingers. Rachel lingered, helping with cleanup, but her thoughts had shifted from the old murder to acute concern about Maya's strange behavior. She knows, Rachel's mind whispered. Somehow, she knows everything. Maya watched her cousin's hands tremble slightly as she wrapped leftover turkey in aluminum foil. The same hands that had gripped that rusty pipe 23 years ago. The same hands that had carefully wiped it clean and tossed it into Ladybird Lake, where it still lay buried in silt, along with other evidence that would perfectly match the sealed case files Maya had glimpsed in Rachel's memories. The pressure built until Maya couldn't distinguish between spoken words and thoughts anymore. Her family's voices became a twisted chorus of truth and lies, each sentence carrying double meanings that cut like knives, the weight of their collective secrets pressed against her skull like a crown of thorns, each revelation drawing fresh blood. The kitchen's warm light seemed to pulse with each new thought, creating a strobe effect that made everything feel surreal and threatening. Through the window, Maya watched the sun sink behind the Texas hills, painting the sky in shades of blood and bruise. The darkness gathering outside seemed to mirror the darkness she now knew lived inside every member of her family. Rachel's thoughts had become a constant stream of panic and calculation, wondering if she should run, if she should confess, if she should find a way to silence Maya before the truth could come out. The sound of the dishwasher's cycle ending made Maya jump. The mechanical click seemed to echo the snap of the Wishbone hours earlier, the moment when everything had changed. She realized with growing horror that there would be no going back. Knowledge, like death, moved in only one direction. Night had fallen completely, and only Maya and Rachel remained in the vast house. The rest of the family had left, taking their secrets with them but leaving their psychic residue, coating every surface like invisible grease. The kitchen clock ticked with maddening precision, its sound reminiscent of Peter Reeves' broken watch, forever marking his final moment. "You have to tell me if this is real." Maya finally broke the silence, her voice barely a whisper. Rachel froze, a dish towel hanging limply from her hands. In Rachel's mind, Maya saw calculations running, denial, confession, or something darker. The memory of how easy it had been to swing that pipe flashed through Rachel's thoughts, followed by an image of the kitchen knife block just steps away. Maya's head throbbed as new images flooded in. Rachel's careful planning after Peter's death, the methodical way she'd created an alibi. She saw Rachel burning her clothes at 3 a.m. behind her parents' house, scrubbing her hands until they bled, rehearsing her story in front of a mirror until even she almost believed it. The police interviews where she'd played the role of confused college student perfectly. The detective's suspicions that never quite solidified into evidence. The case files Maya could see in perfect detail through Rachel's memories matched every sealed record, every detail the police had kept from the public. "I hear everything now," Maya continued, watching Rachel's face drain of color. "Every thought, every secret, not just yours, all of them, but yours." She pressed her palms against the cool granite counter, trying to ground herself as another wave of thoughts crashed through her mind. You were protecting others. Susan Roy, Emily Hall, their faces were in his phone. You saw the photos, the plans he had for them. That's why you... Rachel's coffee mug shattered on the floor. "Stop," she whispered. But her thoughts screamed the truth Maya had already seen, the evidence of other victims she'd found on Peter's phone. The realization that going to the police would have meant his powerful family burying everything. The pipe hadn't just been about revenge. It had been prevention. 1 month later, Maya sat across from her 5th psychiatrist, watching the woman's pen scratch across a notepad. The doctor's thoughts revealed her growing frustration. Every test showed Maya was suffering from acute psychosis, but her description of the murder matched sealed police records with impossible accuracy. Even more disturbing were the details she'd revealed about Peter Reeves' phone contents, information that had only been discovered when police, prompted by Maya's delusions, had finally recovered his personal effects from evidence storage. The lie detector tests had all come back conclusive. Maya believed she was telling the truth, but it was her knowledge of every other patient in the practice, their secrets, their lies, their hidden traumas, that truly unnerved the staff. She'd casually mentioned the doctor's own buried secrets. A malpractice case settled quietly in 2019, a prescription drug dependency carefully hidden from the medical board. In the waiting room, Rachel paced nervously. Her thoughts reached Maya even through the walls. Guilt about Maya's condition warred with relief that Peter's true nature had finally been exposed. The cold case detectives had reopened the investigation, but now focused on Peter's victims, rather than his death. Rachel's secret felt smaller in comparison to what they'd discovered on his recovered phone. Maya closed her eyes, letting the chorus of thoughts wash over her. The psychiatrist's clinical observations, Rachel's complex mix of guilt and vindication, even the receptionist's dark musings about poisoning her abusive husband. The cacophony had become familiar now, almost purposeful. She'd stopped trying to fight it. The truth, Maya had learned, was neither good nor evil. It simply was. Each secret she uncovered revealed another layer of complexity, another shade of gray in a world she'd once thought was black and white. Her family's smaller secrets, the gambling, the affairs, the financial crimes, now seemed like mere ripples compared to the tsunamis of truth she encountered daily. Every person carried an ocean of unspoken truths within them, some horrifying, some heroic, most somewhere in between. As she left the office, Maya caught Rachel's eye. In her cousin's thoughts, she saw the question that had haunted them both since Thanksgiving. What do we do with the power to know everything? Maya had no answer. Some truths, once known, could never be unknown. Some wishes, once granted, could never be taken back. And sometimes, she was learning, the most terrifying truth wasn't what people had done. It was understanding exactly why they had done it. If you've ever experienced something inexplicable at a family gathering, something that made you question everything you thought you knew about your loved ones, share your story in the comments below, if you dare. Have you ever wished to know someone's true thoughts? After hearing this tale, would you still make that wish? Don't forget to subscribe to the Nightmare Maestro's archive and hit that notification bell. There are countless more dark secrets waiting to be unveiled. Share this video with someone who appreciates that sometimes the most terrifying truths hide behind familiar faces. Remember, some wishes do come true. Be careful what you ask for.